Hello. Woo, champagne. Woo, let's celebrate. We're going to celebrate tonight with the men. Hello and welcome to Raw and Uncut with Janet Marie. I have the men here tonight. Our show today is continued from part 2 of losing yourself in your marriage. We're going to hear from the men, and we're going to get the men's perspective of losing yourself in your marriage. We're going to hear from the men tonight. I actually have 3 men sitting in front of me. I want to welcome my panel. I want to welcome Jeffrey Godfrey here tonight. I want to welcome Dennis Mackins.
Hey.
And Dr. Terrence Aldridge.
Hello.
Yes, we're all here at the table, sitting here, and we're going to talk about losing yourself in your marriage. I want to talk about how I even actually came up with the topic of losing yourself in your marriage. When I actually came up with this topic, it was actually, I thought more about the women. I thought about how women lose themselves in their marriage. And I was actually just sitting thinking about it, and I thought, you know, I wonder if men lose themselves in their marriage also. So I asked my husband, I said, babe, you know, I'm going to do this topic on losing yourself in your marriage. I said, the topic is, you know, I'm going to have women, you know, they're going to be on the panel, but I'm just wondering, does men lose themselves also in their marriage? And he looked at me, he gave me this look, and he said, well, aren't we human too? And I said, well, that was my answer. That was my answer. He was like, aren't we human too? I mean, you think everything is just about the woman? So I just kind of walked away, and I said, you know what? That's my answer. I'm going to have a part 2 with the men. And so, and I also want to say, ever since we've actually had the first show with the women losing themselves, you know, talking about how they've lost themselves in their marriages, you know, us women. And since I announced that it's going to be a part 2 with the men, I kid you not, my phone cannot stop ringing. Wow. But check this out, not just from the women calling. You would think it would just be the women calling, wanting to know, right? Because the women are saying, well, how does men lose themselves in their marriage? Like, they want everything to go their way. You know, how does men lose themselves in their marriage? But men, I've been talking to so many men. Like, my phone is ringing, men calling me like, Janet, I can't wait. When are you going to have part 2? You know, I want to hear what the men are going to say. Like, you need to hear what the men, you should. At first, they were like, you should have had the men and the women there together. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. That's coming too. We got another part to this, the listening party. So we got that coming also. But, so I want to start. I'm going to actually start with you, Jeffrey. Let's just say, how long have you been married, Mr. Duckett?
Been married 9 years, the second time around.
The second time around.
Definitely.
Okay. Okay, we're going to talk about, well, you know what? I'm going to let you decide on what you want to talk about. You want to talk about the second time around and the first? We're going to talk about both of them. Is that okay?
But we can talk about them both.
Okay.
I'm excited about talking about everything, actually.
Okay. Do you feel at any point in your marriage that you lost yourself, whether it was your first or your second? Let's talk about when that happened.
Well, let's go on the premise that, you know, in order for one to feel lost in the first place, one has to figure out where they're going. You would assume from the question itself is that if you're lost, you definitely don't have a destination in most cases, or you don't know where you are. And I can honestly say, I guess, in my first marriage, when I look back at it now from this standpoint where I am at this stage in my life, I was lost, but the problem was I didn't know I was lost.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it has to do with life's experiences or inexperience, if you will, for lack of a better word. And in my case, I had some idea what I thought a successful marriage was, or what it should be. and then looking at specific people as what I considered role models in marriages or what have you. And not so much, and they weren't positive role models in terms of marriage. It just seems that they had it going on for whatever reasons. So I can honestly say, yeah, I was lost in the first marriage because I already had a preconceived idea of what I wanted my marriage to be like. And I think we all have, we're looking at, in most cases, when we're young, what have you, we look at marriages through rose glasses. Nothing can go wrong, or you don't anticipate the challenges or problems. So, and of course, this is my second. I was married 15 years for the first marriage, and the second marriage, been married now 9 years, what have you. And it's a different approach. And a lot of that different approach has a lot to do with where I am at this stage in my life, or what have you. But I've also come to the conclusion that there are the two most important days in one's life is the day they're born. The second day is when they find out why. And in my case, and I can honestly tell you, I honestly believe with this marriage I have now, I've realized why I was born. And I can elaborate on that and go on. But
so you would actually say that you learned a lot from being married from the first marriage.
Definitely.
And actually, and it didn't work out because you feel like you didn't know your destination, you didn't know who you were at that point, and you were, how old did you say you were when you got married?
I was 23 years
You was
of age.
23.
23 years of age.
So at 23, you don't even know the search, right?
No.
I mean,
like
really, of who you really are. You're not even thinking clear about, you said you had role models, but they were not the best role models at the time for you.
When I think about it, you have relatives that are married. You have relatives who aren't married, or who, let's just say, from the man's perspective, they were doing what they wanted to do anyway. And when you're young, you don't find too many people explaining to you about marriage. And if
Right.
they do, it comes from the let's just say the raw or street perspective as to. Let's just say these people weren't taking their marriages seriously either.
So because they weren't taking their marriage serious, and they were your role models, then you didn't take your marriage serious, your first marriage, that is.
I could say that, but I also went into the marriage with the idea that mine was going to be different.
Okay.
Okay.
In what way?
That it was, first of all, it was going to last, and I felt like I could be open and honest about everything that I did or felt. And if we have this Pollyanna effect about what we think a marriage should be like, what have you.
So what? Don't mean to interrupt. Mm-hmm. What did you think a marriage was supposed to be at 23? What did you think?
At 23?
Although you had all these other people around you that you think didn't take their marriage so serious, but you said your marriage was going to be different. So what vision did you have for your marriage?
Well, in my vision for my marriage is that wife and I were both going to be very successful in anything that we did. The other thing is that we had, because of my work ethic, and I always had, as far as the men in my family were considered hard workers and always went to work. Grandfather was a hard worker, especially one on my mother's side of the family. I had an uncle that I looked up to very much so. He was a hard worker, but also, you consider a ladies' man, if you will. Mm-hmm. But he was married. His famous words: "Take care of home first. Take care of home. Everything else will be okay."
So is that what you thought? Is that what most men think? That if you go to work, not just, I didn't mean to say that, mm-hmm. but a possibility that it could be just, okay. Did you think from just because you worked hard and that's what you've seen the men in your family do? Did you think, because you said no matter what you and your wife did, your first wife that is, that you were going to be successful? Did you think that working hard was enough to have a successful marriage?
Yeah. In most cases, yeah. And because I think a lot of times, especially from the background which I've come from, working hard, and as long as people were still together, regardless, that was usually the sign of success, regardless of whatever was going on in the marriage.
You still stay together regardless, because as long as the bills were paid, everything was taken care of, then really there was no need to have any problems, really, no issues.
There are
really
no
in the
issues.
marriage.
And I think a lot of times what happens is, and I think because of society is now, and the culture is, you have more women working outside of the home, and women who are basically can control their own destiny. I think for many cases, in most cases, women depended on men for everything. So there's a lot of things that they tolerated that they probably won't tolerate now. And so, and because of their dependency on the man. But having said that, I consider myself a progressive thinker, if you will, for lack of a better word. Progressive. Consider myself understanding, and
So you were open. Did you feel like you were open in your marriage? Because I don't know if you want to call it a stigma, but people talk about, and women talk about, that men have problems, big problems, opening up in their marriage, like communicating. Was that a problem for you?
Well,
especially being 23.
No, I didn't think it was a problem for me because, like I said, I consider myself progressive in that respect.
Okay.
I didn't think it was a problem for me. But in the back of my mind, I always thought, what I said goes because I was the man.
Because you was the man. Because that's how men thought, right?
Right. And that was basically, in most cases, my role model.
Did that cause problems in your marriage, though? Because you felt like whatever I say, that's what goes.
Yes and no. Yes and no. Because
Okay.
I think at some point in time, it just gets to the point where the women will probably go along for a while because I think at some point then, they probably felt like that's what it should be like too, or just to make things go easier in the beginning of the marriage. And then it gets old after a while.
Exactly. So you all, when would you say that you all started having problems?
I would say when I think about it, because there are a lot of things, I think outside circumstances, people being involved in your marriage, still try to hold on, and this will be from both perspectives, still try to hold on to your singleness, if you will.
What do you mean when you say that?
Well, married, but you want to you act single. Married, but you act single.
Married, but you act single. Married, but you act single in what way?
Well, the fact of the matter is that you are married. People know that you're married, but you're still hanging out.
Okay.
Still hanging out, probably going to the clubs. Still hanging out with people who aren't married.
And doing
doing
single people
and
things.
doing single people things. And that's not a good recipe for a successful marriage. And there's nothing wrong with still hanging out and going out, but there comes a time and a limit as to what, those things aren't conducive to a productive and successful marriage.
So you would say that played a part in why your marriage didn't work? Because you were not, first of all, you didn't know your destination, as you stated earlier, but yet you wasn't clear about what it took to have a successful marriage.
Well,
but yet you were so young too, right?
I was young, and the premise of your question the premise of your question sounds as if you sound like I didn't know what it took to have a successful marriage, meaning that there are some things that I was doing that was single, not necessarily.
Okay.
Because see, I came to marriage with the tradition of thinking that mine was going to be different because I wasn't going to do those things that friends were doing.
Okay, so you're saying you did not do those things, or you did?
Not in the beginning.
Not in the beginning. So what made you change?
Because I felt like I was trying hard and the other person wasn't.
Okay. So you felt like it was one-sided in a sense.
Right. And I'll be honest with you, and being a young black man too, because I didn't want my children to be statistics. I wanted to be home with, I wanted them to grow up in a household with two parents.
Right.
And I wanted to make sure that, especially my sons were not the statistics that we have today that are not good for young black men growing up, especially if there's not a role model.
In the home.
In the home.
With two parents.
With two parents. And so, and for a long time, I held on just so that could happen, but being miserable at the same time.
Would you say that you you were miserable, would you say that you both were miserable in
Oh, it's
doing it for the children?
Oh, no, well, no question.
Yeah.
Because then we were being young, too, being young in the marriage. I would think that when you're young and in the marriage, too, you have this idea, and there are certain things, too, that you want to, let's just say, you want other people to perceive you in a certain way. And you have to keep in mind, not only were we ambitious, my ex-wife and I, because, you know, we had 3 beauty salons, an art gallery. So compared to most of my friends, I was doing well.
Right.
And that image also was something I wanted to maintain.
You wanted to keep that.
And maintain.
Because you had built it.
Well, not only that, but, you know, when people saw me, Jeff was the man.
Yeah. And
you know, so, you know.
So that was an ego thing. Let's be honest.
Well, ego?
It's okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was an ego thing, but and definitely in my case, it was an ego, and now people have these preconceived ideas or these positive preconceived ideas about you, and you want to maintain that. Mm-hmm. And so, and then of course, then when you've got people who are looking to you or looking up to you, mm-hmm. and telling you how much they respect you and admire you, etc. The last thing I wanted to know that shucks, my household wasn't all that.
Right.
So, but it's been a learning life experience, and I can honestly tell you things are definitely different in the way I perceive things now. And I just think that's just a normal process of life.
So you would say that you actually learned a valuable lesson. You learned many lessons from that because you're talking about you're growing. You're 23 years old. You get married at 23.
Yep. And
you learn so much from that because in 23 years you have a business, you have children, you're married.
Job, working 2 jobs.
Working 2 jobs, more than that really, because everything else that you have, it takes a lot.
Yes.
So you kind of get lost in that also.
Yes, you definitely get lost in that also. And as I said, not only that, but we owned 3 homes at the time.
Right. So it was a lot.
Then it was a lot.
Right.
And I had done a lot compared to most people my age.
Your age. I understand.
At that point in time.
So you would say now your marriage today, because this is your second marriage.
That's correct.
And when you came into this marriage, you came in with a total different mindset of you knew what your destination was at this point, where you wanted to be in your life.
Exactly. Knew what my destination was. I wasn't out to impress. My attitude was, this is who I am. Mm-hmm. In going through life, there's not too much that can surprise me anymore in terms of what people do or what they're into. Mm-hmm. So those things, nothing shocks me anymore. Nothing shocks me.
What do you mean when you say nothing shocks you?
Well, it can be from anywhere from anyone's things that they may have done. And I would go as far as saying, and I'll give you an example. Mm-hmm. Remember before going off to college, my mother wanted to have the talk with me, if you will. And she said to me, and we're taking this walk. She says to me, you're getting ready to go off to school now. And when you go away to school, you're going to probably see some things that you've never seen before. I said, okay. and I'm asking Mom, we really have to have this talk? Mm-hmm. She says, well, yeah. But my mother's always kept it real with me, and she was one of those, I don't know, Janet, you've met my mother. Mm-hmm. And,
she keeps it real.
Yeah, she keeps it real, and we have real conversations. She doesn't sugarcoat anything. And I've always admired her for that. But having said that, and then this particular subject was, she's going to say you're going to probably see some things that people do that you're not accustomed to doing or may even want to do. And in that, for the bottom line is she's talking about sexual experiences. And she said, but I've raised you where you can make up your own mind.
Right.
And I can honestly tell you, all my brothers and my sisters, I consider us leaders and not followers. Okay. And there's a difference. So therefore, we make up our own mind, and we're not easily influenced, if you will. So that talk was pertaining somewhat to that, and it was very interesting. So that's what I mean. when I talk about those experiences and being able to make up one's own mind, etc.
Okay. Okay. Dennis,
Hey, Janet, thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here, Dennis. Thanks so much for being here. We want to talk about how long you've been married, Dennis, and is there at any point you feel like in your life that you were lost in your marriage at any point?
Well, I got married at the age of 25, and I wouldn't say I lost myself,
Mm-hmm.
but there was a part of me that I desired to lose. I used to run the streets hard.
Okay, when you say run the streets hard,
I
what do you
mean,
mean?
I was out there as far as going and coming as I wanted to.
Okay.
Before I got married, and I used to ride motorcycles. I was that guy that was in the pack that was always up on one wheel. I wanted to be out front. I was that guy that women wanted, and I was that guy that wanted women.
Mm-hmm.
That's the part of my life that I desired to lose in my marriage. And I'll tell you, the first couple of years of my marriage, I've been married for 20 years. And the first couple of years, it was tough because I was still trying to be
That person. Mm-hmm.
And not only those two things, I was a big gambler. I used to love to gamble, hang with the guys, that was just my thing. And when I met my wife, she kind of changed that. She helped me change who I was or who I am. And when she came, when we entered into this marriage, the women that I had seen and were friends with, when I met her, it was just no other woman like her. And I was one of those guys that always said, hey, I'll never get married because I seen so many women.
And you desired them.
Well, I seen so many women be unfaithful to their boyfriends.
Okay.
And I did not want to put a ring on a woman's finger knowing all the trash that I've seen out there.
So you believe because you saw that every woman was like that?
At that time, at that
Mm-hmm.
age, I'm thinking, okay, if all women are like this, I don't want one living in my house like that.
Right.
But when I met her, it was something special about her. And she was the woman that made me say, this is it. She's the one I want to try this with. But when in the first couple of years, though, Janet, I still wanted to go. And that's where the problem was. The problem wasn't her, it was me.
Right.
And I used to cut hair back in the days, and I've seen successful men come through the shop. I've seen unsuccessful men come through the shop. And I learned from those guys. I never had that father figure in my life.
Mm-hmm.
My father left my life at a very young age due to some tragic things that he involved himself in. So I never had that male figure. My stepfather in the house was not the ideal stepfather.
Right.
So these guys that came through the barbershop was all I had to learn from. And at that time, I was going to church, and I had some guys in the church. Although I was in the church, I was not of the church, but I was there.
Right.
And there were some positive men in the church that kind of took me up under their arms. But at the same time, when I left church, I was going out doing what I wanted to do, But you can actually learn from a lot of other people's mistakes, and that's what I think I did. I had a guy one time tell me, be the same person you are when you go in your marriage, because if she married you for who you are, then she should continue to love you for that person, that you are, because she married that person. But I found that I went in thinking that was true, but it wasn't.
No.
Because we, from the first year we was married to now, 20 years, I'm not the same person I was 20 years ago. You're not the same person.
No,
you
that's
were
called
20
growth,
years ago.
life experience. Like you learn from your life experiences, the things that you go through in your life.
She helped me, even when she continued to go to church, and I stayed at home. I continued to watch her pray, and I did not. And she kind of encouraged me along that walk. But, after those couple of years, things started changing. You know, the influence she had on me,
Changed you.
it changed me.
So when you were in your marriage, the first couple of years, you actually had issues that you were dealing with on your own. Did you realize that before you went into your marriage?
No, because I was trying to be that same person that I was going into the marriage, and which was wrong.
Okay, but you were being that person going into the marriage, but did she actually see that person, or were you wearing two different hats? One when you was around her and another one when you was, no?
The one thing you know about me, I am who I am. Accept me or don't. That's the kind of person I was, and I'm still that person. You know, I am who I am. Although who I was then is not who I am today, I am
Right.
who I am right now.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Well, in a sense, but yes and no.
Well-
And I say that because we can go into a marriage and we can say that we're going to be your desires was always still there.
Well, let me say this.
Okay.
Maybe she thought that she could change me
Maybe
when
so.
we went into that marriage. But again,
But it was already known who you were.
she knew who I was going in. And maybe she thought she could change me, but I'm going to tell you, a person got to want to change for themselves. Nobody can change
That's true.
anybody.
So what made you change, Dennis?
I tell you what, watching her spiritual growth, it helped me.
Okay.
And that's where my change came in when I started really taking church seriously and the relationship that I have with Christ. That helped me tremendously. And there were some other things later on down the road that helped too. I mean, I heard you talk with the women during the last segment about the 5 love languages.
Mm-hmm.
That took my wife and I's relationship to a whole nother level.
That's awesome.
But there was growth in that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and when I started learning to speak her language and she started learning to speak my language, I mean, I wouldn't desire to have another woman close to me.
So you would say what changed it, but your spirituality grew.
That was number one.
And what else changed you with your spiritual? How else did you change in your marriage?
Well, when I lined myself up with him, God, let me also say this, I still was not a perfect person. I was still striving for perfection. But at the same time, my relationship with Christ, I think, was the foundation of my change.
Okay. Did you feel like in any parts of your marriage that you were controlling at all in your marriage?
If you ask my wife, she'll say I'm still controlling.
I think that's a man thing.
But, you know, I wouldn't say that I'm controlling. I just make decisions. My wife I would say she's at some times indecisive. And the fact that I can make a decision and go with whatever the consequences are, you know, she just needs more time to process, and I don't.
So does that mean because she needs more time to process and you don't, then you take control and say, well, this is just what it is?
Well, no. Let me make sure we understand each other
Okay.
here. In this marriage, we are open to listen to each other.
Right.
Now, most of the time, she does yield to my decision.
Right.
Well, you know what? I can honestly say all the time she yields to my decision. However, if she and I disagree on something, I'm going to hear her out.
Right.
And we're going to talk about it. And if I feel that her decision making, whatever it is that we're talking about right then, if she's right, you know, I would go with her. I have no problem with that.
Right.
I'm not always right. I don't always make the right decisions. She's a very smart lady, and I respect that. So I don't want you, when you say control, and think I control every aspect of her life or the marriage. There is a compromise there.
Right. Do you, as far as with communication, you have a good line of communication?
Oh, yeah.
You do?
I love, my wife is my best friend. We talk, it's hard to love somebody you can't communicate with. I'll go into a lot of people's homes, and I speak with a lot of people that's been married for a long time, and I ask them, what is the key? What is the key? And a lot of times you do hear communicate. 'Cause if you can't talk to anybody, it's hard to love them. It's hard to get along with them. That's when
It's
you start
hard to have a good relationship.
Exactly. Even in our spiritual walk, if you don't keep talking to him, your relationship with Christ, it starts separating itself. Then you find yourself back in the street and doing things you shouldn't be doing.
Right.
It's all, to me, it all boils down to communication.
It does. So
Do you agree with that, guys?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
If I don't know, Janet, can I interject?
yes, yes.
Okay.
Anyone,
You know,
please.
There's just something that was very, very powerful, and that was, because I too have come to this place too where I believe in my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and I think that was probably one of the number one things too
Amen.
that's helped change who I am today. But having said that, I had this conversation on an airplane with a gentleman, and he's very spiritually oriented, what have you. But he talked about the communication process that he and his wife have. And one reason we even got in this conversation because he had known this was my second marriage, what have you, and then he was asking me how it worked out, but how it's working out. But his decision-making process, in terms of communicating, when he and his wife are communicating, and let's say, for instance, they come to a point where they disagree on something. And he has, as you just said, Dennis, you hear your wife out because you respect her input, her decision, and everything else.
Exactly.
And so, but he said something that was very powerful. He says, if it comes to the point where we can't make a decision or we continue to disagree, he said, because I love you and because I love my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, he said, God holds me responsible.
Exactly.
So if he's holding me responsible, I will make the final decision. And we will roll with it and let the chips fall where they may at that point in time.
Okay.
But we'll both pray on it. But he said, because God holds me responsible, that's why I'm going to make the decision. So there won't be one of this, well, you made the decision last time, let me do it, or a compromise.
Right.
He said, and that's not showing any disrespect to my wife. I'm just saying, honey, God holds me responsible, so I'm going to make this.
Would you say, okay, although we can be as spiritual, we're all spiritual. We all say that we're all spiritual or religious or whatever you may have be, because we all believe in a higher being. We believe in God. With all that who we are, we still have issues and battles that we deal with within our marriage. And we have to choose our battles carefully, and even in your marriage, because you can be on a spiritual journey together, but yet because you are two different people, you think differently. So you're gonna bump heads with one another.
Well, that's where discernment comes in. Discernment comes in there. Yeah, and you will. But like I said, there's a lot to be said. And you said it. I guess simply put, you pick and choose your battles. Not every battle is made to be won.
Yes, that's true. But do you pick and choose your battles?
Oh, yeah.
Right. Do you
even to this day?
Okay.
Some things aren't.
Well, that comes with experience, because you say this is your
Exactly.
second marriage, so that comes with experience, that you know to probably your first marriage, you said that you were open, but yet did you pick and choose your battles? Now you can pick and choose your battles because you have experience.
I pick and choose my battles based upon the experience that I had, and let's just say, I can honestly say this: those same decisions, even when I was picking and choosing those battles, I wouldn't have made the same decisions based on what I know now.
Right. Because you have life experience.
Life experience. And like I said, and especially for us men or anyone else, when we get our egos out of the way too, our decision-making process becomes a whole lot simpler and easier too. But at the same time, like I said, that's when you operate with discernment at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Aldridge.
Yes.
Let's talk about when you got married, because you're actually, let's talk about you
Okay.
with your marriage.
Okay. Well, currently I'm single. I'm not married right now, and
You're divorced.
I'm divorced. My
Right.
journey, I was married for 9 years. I was divorced roughly about 10 years ago. And that was a tough time for me. That was a very tough time going through a divorce. And I know the topic of your show today is called losing yourself or being lost. I can definitely say that during that period of being married, I can say I definitely was lost. And I kind of look at it a little bit different. Maybe
Okay.
I was thinking about the question when you posed the question. Initially, I was thinking about losing yourself in your marriage. And I think back to that, the first thing that came to my mind is, what did I have to give up when I got married?
Right.
And that was my perspective. And as you and when you posed the question, that was the first thing I thought about is, okay, when I get married, what is it I have to give up? Because that's what you always hear.
Right.
You always hear from those older gentlemen in your family and your buddies and everybody, man, when you get married, you're going to have the ball and chain. You know, you ain't going to be able to do this. You're not going to be able to go to sports bars. You're not going to be able to go to Myrtle Beach and hang out at Bike Week anymore. You know, I'm in a fraternity, Omega Psi Phi. You're not going to be able to go to the conclaves, and you're not going to be able to hang with the bros.
Right.
You're going to have to give up all of that playtime, that time hanging with the buddies. And a lot of that time when you're with the buddies, there's some things going on that your wife probably wouldn't approve, you know. So when I look back at it, it's like, oh, man, I got to give this up. And my perspective was, in all frankness, I gave up some of it on the surface to make things look good.
Okay.
But certain things I just wasn't, I didn't give up. And I thought, sort of like what I think maybe Jeffrey was talking about, thinking if I'm going to work every day, I'm paying the bills, you know, I'm taking care of my wife, doing things like that, and I'm coming in at a respectable hour, that things should be okay. That
You
know,
thought that was enough.
Yeah, I thought that if I did those things, I hit those markers, that okay, I got certain nights I can go hang with the fellas and do the things that I needed to, that I wanted to do.
Right.
And I just thought that was the way it should be, and I can't say that was my perspective at that time. Now looking back at it, I guess I didn't realize how much hanging out I was doing. Okay.
And that caused a problem in your marriage.
That caused a problem. That caused a problem.
And how old you say you were when you got married?
I got married at 31.
Okay.
My wife and I, we never had kids. Got married, and I was divorced roughly at age 40. But I can remember it being rather prolific to me when I was doing some of the hanging out and thinking, okay, I'm the man. I'm taking care of things. I've gotten us a house. You know, we got cars. You know,
You living a good life.
We living a good life. We both very educated. You know, college degrees, graduate degrees, all of that. I mean, you know, this whole perception of, you know, kind of this.
And you thought
Michelle and Barack is what I thought we were. You know, that kind of thing.
Right.
But it really wasn't.
Right.
Taken care of. But I can remember coming home and. I can remember coming into the living room. It may have been 2:00 in the morning, and my wife, she was sitting in the living room in the dark, and she said, "Stop." You know, and I knew I was like, "Oh, I'm in trouble now." You know, she said, "Stop," and she just asked me one question: Why does my husband have to still be in the street? Can you answer that for me? Why do you have to still do that?
And what did you say?
I didn't have an answer. I thought a lot of it was okay. I'm still taking care. You know, we got.
So
this
you
nice
really,
house.
you really actually thought being married, although you were
Taking care of home.
taking care of home, you all well educated, somewhat of, you know, Barack Obama and Michelle's lifestyle. You thought that was enough. You thought that was enough.
I really thought that.
You thought that would keep her happy.
I thought that would carry the day. I mean, I still did birthdays. I still did Christmas, Thanksgiving, and Valentine's. I did all of that with, you know, it was grand when I did it. But I look back at it now, and a lot of it, some of it was more show than it was real. And at the time, I can't say that I realized that, but
Over the years.
In hindsight, I look back at it now. I think she basically just wanted me to be at home and for us to bond and do things together. Whereas I kind of grew up in a traditional setting where the women kind of did their thing here and the men were over here. You know, the men hung out in the garage and smoked cigars, and they did their thing and did yard work and did that kind of
So
thing.
you
And
didn't
women-
see like men and women, husband and wife doing things together. So because you didn't grow up seeing that, you didn't think that that's how a marriage life was supposed to be.
Well,
You thought
I-
if you did what you did with the fellas, and she did what she did, was doing what she did was just supposed to be at home, or did it matter to you what she did?
Well, yeah, of course it mattered to me what my wife did.
Right.
But what I'm saying is I had a very traditional view
Right.
of what she would do. Stuff with her sisters and mom, and
And that
stuff
was
like
good.
that. And they
Right.
did quote unquote women things, and guys did guy things.
Right.
And I never saw the mixing of two
Together
together as a couple,
married
as a
couple.
married couple, and that never, at the time in which it was happening, I never thought of it. Okay, it's okay for my wife and I to go and do other things and stuff like
Right.
that. And it's not to say we went on vacations and we did those things, but together. But there was definitely a clear barrier there.
Would you say you was in love with your wife?
Yeah,
You was
I
always
would-
in love with your wife.
I was always in love with my wife.
Was you in love with your wife when you divorced her? When you all divorced?
Yes, I was in love with my wife when we divorced.
Whose decision was it to get a divorce?
It was my wife's decision because
How did that make you feel?
I mean, like I say, that was probably the toughest part of my life.
Right.
And it was tough because I saw myself, frankly, as a failure.
Right.
I was a failure. I did not have a successful marriage.
Did you all talk about counseling?
We talked about counseling, but I think at that time, we talked about counseling. It was too far gone, in my wife's view.
In her view.
In her view, I was like, let's talk about, and that made me bitter. That made me bitter. I said, okay, now I'm willing to. She said, hey, Terrence, it's been 9 years, and now,
Nothing has changed.
Yeah, and I've been talking to you about let's do these things, and now you want to talk about counseling when I'm on my way out the door. So there were a lot of bitter feelings that I had to overcome, knowing that I was the cause of that, and I was the cause of really my own pain. So that was tough for me. That was tough for me. It was tough for my ego.
Did you get married for the wrong reasons? Do you feel like you got married? Well, you said you was in love with your wife, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now, I guess you said, did I get married for the wrong reasons? I mean, I felt I was in love, and it was, okay, we've been dating 3 years. It's time for us to get married. So you go out and, again, I think my thing is I follow a very, I guess, a traditional kind of way of looking at things.
Mm-hmm.
And I needed to look at things. When I say traditional, that is from my perspective. I saw the world a particular way. So we've dated 3 years. It's time for us to get married, And I can't say I made the transition fully. Certain things I did stop, but certain things I just did not. And it continued on, and it resulted in a failed marriage.
Dennis, would you say that you actually do you date your wife now? Do you all date?
We do.
You do.
We do. We date. I'm one of those kind of guys, when I take my wife out on a date, that's when I get the door for her. That's when and at the car, of course. She's every door that we walk into, I open that door for her. But as far as the car,
Mm-hmm.
I only do that when
Okay.
we go on a date.
When
And
you
I
go
know
on-
that sounds crazy, guys, but I don't want to be doing certain things out of obligations or because I'm supposed to. I want to do it because I want to.
Mm-hmm.
And when we go out on a date, I want to do that. But as far as us grabbing keys, running to Walmart, you got to get in before I pull off. That's just how we roll.
Well, hey, if that works for you.
But yes,
that's fine.
we
yeah.
do go on dates, and I still enjoy them. I really do.
Okay, how do you determine you're gonna date? You're gonna go on a date.
Well, I call and say, hey, what do we have? She actually, and we talked about this. Today's Saturday. We talked about this on yesterday. always on Friday, get up in the morning and say, okay, what's planned? What we have planned for the day? What we have planned for tomorrow? And if there's a space in there where we can just get out and get away from the house, hey, let's go.
Let's go.
Well, sometimes you have to make the space.
You have to, and that's true because you're absolutely right.
Sometimes you
Because
have to make the space.
the schedules do get busy,
Yeah, they do. And you got to catch yourself when they start getting busy.
and that's exactly right. I agree with
yourself.
Jeffrey on that. You got to make time for one another.
Yeah. And a date doesn't necessarily have to be a big to do. It can be going to Walmart and spending
And
the
you
rest
know
of
what?
the day together.
One of our dates was when the Walmart and New York opened up for the first time. We got dressed up and went down there together. That was the first date. I mean, that was the first date we took. I know that sounds
was
crazy,
exciting, yeah.
but it sounds crazy, guys. But I'm telling you, it's the little things
Yeah.
that makes a
It
difference.
makes all the big difference. The little
Yeah,
things.
it's interesting you mentioned that because I can remember being married and working on the house and stuff like that. My ex, she always wanted to go to Lowe's, and that was a highlight of our time. That a lot of the highlight of the time we had together was going to Lowe's and Walmart and stuff like that.
And you know what? I mean, even when you get married and you talk about going out doing the things you want to do, and it's okay to take your wife with you.
No question.
If you want to go out and to a bar or something, hey, take her with you.
Take it with you. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Let her, and
Yeah.
you know how you can really get that bond. You tell her some of the man's secrets.
Uh-oh.
Not all.
Okay.
Now, what kind of
all.
secrets he talking?
What's some of the men's
Okay,
secrets?
you giving up the code now.
It wouldn't be a secret if I said
My
it.
mic about to
I
turn
say,
off.
you say you tell them some, so what's the some?
You can. Case in point, if you go out, you can see game being played.
Yeah.
And you bring that to her attention. One of the oldest tricks of the game. When a gentleman might say, "Don, I can't find my cell phone," or something like that. And the young lady may be sitting next to him. and you say, "Excuse me, can you dial my number for a second?" Oldest game in the book.
Oh, oldest game. Oh, that means that they don't want to be with that.
Now, see, that completely went over your head.
No, it didn't.
That's how he got her phone number.
There you go.
See?
Okay.
So,
Okay.
but yeah, those kinds of things. But like I said, you can date, you make time, and then I still open up the door for my wife. Matter of fact, it's a game to me now only because she goes to the door because she's so independent too.
Uh-huh.
My wife is very independent. She's so independent. So when we go to the door, even the car door, she goes. I said, "What are you doing?" I'm supposed to open up that door. Don't touch that door.
He's a great
that's awesome.
husband.
That's
He's a
awesome.
great husband.
So
We want all these husbands out here to be a great husband. At home, chilling at home, relaxing, like how guys have their game day or whatever, just chilling at home, doing their man thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, does your wife or your girlfriend give you that space, or how do you feel about that? Just being, because actually, and I want you to think about this too, because I want you to think about this even before you got to this point where you are, and how you got to the point where you are, or if it's even still an issue. Okay, and what I'm asking is, because I hear so many guys complaining about when you could be in the house, you're doing all the things that you're supposed to be doing, taking care of home, good provider, all those things. But you're in your home and you're just chilling and you're just not affectionate. Like, a lot of women love affection, and a lot of men are not affectionate. I don't know if anyone, I don't know if.
That's a myth.
I said a lot of men.
That's still a myth.
Okay, we're going to talk about that.
Definitely.
So,
Well, let me jump in on this.
okay, jump in on it,
As
Dennis.
far as the sports thing,
Okay,
I'm not a big sports fan.
okay.
Okay, I'm the type of guy I can watch it or sit down and watch it when it gets down to the playoffs or the Final Fours and stuff like that.
Okay.
And I only watch it then because I know that's going to be the conversation of
Right.
of the room,
Right.
Or the week.
or the week, exactly. So I'm the guy. I will sit down. I'm watching ID channel, investigative reports, forensic files,
Well, whatever it is that you're
it is.
doing.
And you know what? My wife said that's one aspect of me that she loves because she don't like sports either. So I don't have that issue.
You don't have that issue.
Right.
So just being in the house, just chilling. Do you like being in the room with your wife all the time? You like being in a separate room?
No, I like now that you want to talk about issues. This is a small issue we have.
Okay.
My wife likes to get things done, and she will not sit down. She always either doing laundry. She may go in there and cook, and I'm the one saying, "Hey, we can eat a sandwich. Just come and sit down beside me."
Right.
You know, I'm okay.
So
with
you're that affectionate one.
Yeah,
in the relationship.
Yeah, we can
in the
be,
marriage.
and I'm the guy that sit there and I can watch Lifetime with her. I can shed a tear. I'm sensitive when it comes down to that.
Yeah, it's important that a man drop a tear every now and then too. For sure.
Because men have problems with even sharing the remote control. They sharing the TV. They
No.
Not me.
No. And that's not me
Jeffrey,
either.
that's not you.
No, hold it. The only competition my wife has is when CNN and MSNBC comes on.
It doesn't matter what you're watching.
Yeah, it doesn't. No, it doesn't matter. I mean, I can sit down with
Whatever it is that you like.
Yeah, but you know what? You mentioned that book, The 5 Love Languages.
Yes.
And see, this is where I want not all men, but most men. See, especially traditional men, where we have this idea of how to love a woman. When you learn how she wants to be loved is when you start having success in your marriage.
Exactly. That is so true what he's saying.
So,
So you've all figured that out because
well, life experiences and everything else.
I've written them down. Those are the 5 love languages.
5 love languages. So when you learn how
share those
she
with me, brother?
wants to be loved, how she wants to be loved,
Exactly.
is when a lot of your problems are gone.
right.
That's true.
And not all. And my wife is not. She's not the kind of woman as and I would recommend this book to every man that's out there. Actually, my wife is not the kind of woman that needs a lot of things, if you will.
Right.
As I said before, she's very independent, what have you. But what she does require is affection and touch. Acknowledge that she's in the room.
Right. Women love that. Women love affection.
And
you like affection. Well, it just depends on the one. It just depends on the person in the marriage. And you say your wife loves affection, and you give her affection. You saying
actually time.
Time.
She wants time.
She wants time.
Let me do this. Let me say this. That book, there's 5 different languages. I'm gonna go ahead and break it down.
Go ahead.
1, it's gonna be 5 different ways that a person, whether male or female, feel that they're loved. 1 is going to be acts of service.
There you go.
That's that person that just wants you to help them do whatever it is, whether it's
you
vacuum.
do for them all the time.
Exactly. Whether it's washing the dishes, whether it's cooking, whether it's vacuuming, whatever. The second one is quality time.
There you go.
No matter what it is, what she's doing, she wants you there. She wants you involved with what she's doing. 3 was gifts. Okay? If you give her something, she'll love you to death. That's gifts. 4 was words of affirmation. Just letting her know, hey, you look good today. Hey, I appreciate you doing that for me. Or just letting you know, the words of affirmation, letting her know that you appreciate who she is and what she has done. And the last one was physical touch. Usually a person, like I listened to Terrence, he was talking about what he was doing to make his wife feel loved. But actually what he was doing is what he would receive as love. And see, he was providing, he was providing and bringing everything to the table.
Acts of service.
He would fall under acts of service.
Exactly.
And he was doing all that. But see, the way that she felt love could have been quality time.
Right.
And
That's what she wanted.
That's what she wanted. She didn't care about all that other stuff.
And she was lacking that.
And she was lacking that. So in order for him to make that woman feel loved, he had to fill that tank up.
Okay.
And those are the same things that apply for men too.
Exactly.
So
absolutely.
A woman has the same responsibility figuring out what it is that turns us.
Okay, but do you learned those things from reading the book?
Exactly.
Okay, that's how you. So you learned from that book how to treat your wife.
Exactly.
And she learned how to treat you.
Exactly.
Okay.
Janet, let me also say that book. My wife and I read that book every year on our anniversary, and we read a page a day, and we talk about it. No matter where we are, we either get on the phone, we talk about the chapter, and where we are at this point in time in our marriage.
And my wife and I taught the class.
That's awesome.
We had some groups come in, and we actually had a couple of couples that was on the brinks of saying, "Hey, I'm done." But both of them was great, loving people, but they were just speaking different languages. One was speaking Spanish, one speaking English.
Right.
And they weren't communicating. It goes back to what we started off with. Communication.
And that plays a lot in a lot of marriages, and people don't understand that communication is a huge factor in your marriage or relationship, even before you even getting into the marriage. Like if you don't have that communication in your relationship before you even get married, it's going to cause problems. Just like you said, you had problems with your marriage because of where you were in your marriage at the time.
Well, see, like I said, my wife is always up doing things. Hers is acts of service.
Right.
She thinks she's up doing something.
And that's enough.
That she think that's going to be enough to make me feel loved.
Right.
It's not.
It's
and
not.
we learned that later.
Right.
I was the physical touch kind of, and the words of affirmation. You know, you can be too.
Right.
And when she started telling me, "Oh, Dennis, you look nice today," "Oh, Dennis, I appreciate you doing this," but I like to be appreciated.
Right, exactly.
And physical touch, that's just most men is first or second love language. You know.
It can be one of them. You can have one, all five, or experience all of those love languages. But as you said, my main one was affirmation. Tell me I'm doing a damn good job.
Exactly.
Okay.
Just let me know I'm doing what I'm supposed to do.
If I want to make my wife feel loved, all I got to do is get in there and cook. I can get in there and vacuum. I can fold
So
her
you
clothes.
know exactly
I
what
know-
to do to
I
make
know-
her feel good, make her
I
happy.
know exactly what to do.
And she knows what to do for you now.
And if I don't do that, it'll be a long night.
or weak.
Oh, well, I ain't gonna say weak now.
Well, you know what? Okay, well,
I can't say I've read the book, and that obviously something I need to look at. Wish I would have had it several years ago. But in any case, as I think about a lot of the things that you're saying, it makes so much sense about where we fit in emotionally, what happens to us emotionally when we get the affirmation or like the compliments and things like that. And I can't really speak to the actual words of the book, but just listening to you, I just appreciate you sharing that with me.
Makes you want to go get it, too.
Yeah, I'm going to get that.
I'm telling you, it will take.
makes you
yeah.
want to go get
Yeah.
it, even just,
Yeah, well,
not
I'm
even just in a
single now.
marriage, just
Yeah,
single,
just-
being
I'm
single and
single
knowing how to
and-
treat one another. So it's
Exactly.
not just for men, it's for men and women, whether you're
Definitely.
married or you're not married.
Definitely.
Right.
It was worth the investment
Exactly.
into the relationship
Exactly.
or the marriage.
For the
Right.
marriage,
Okay.
exactly.
Period. It really was.
Dennis, I want to ask you a question.
Here we go.
No. Actually, and I'm asking you this question too, and I'm actually gonna ask Jeffrey also. We're gonna talk about the children.
Okay.
Because a lot of times, if you all heard the women speak, and a lot of women feel like this, they talk about how they're more hands-on with the children in the marriage than the men. You find the women doing more in the marriage when it comes to the children than the men.
I don't. I think it's something that should be co-parented together. My wife, on the other hand, she's the educator. She's a guidance counselor, so she handles the educational part of their growth. I'm more so of I like to have fun. I like to laugh. I like to talk, kid, play around, and the disciplinary in the house. But I think it takes two. It really does, because she can do things for those kids and give them some qualities and traits that I can't give them, and
Right.
vice versa. So I think it takes both.
It does take both.
It does take both.
It's just that a lot of women complain that they do the majority, and a lot of men don't. But you're saying in your marriage that that's not the case.
That's not the case, and I don't work weekends anymore, and I stopped working weekends a long time ago because I want to be that father that I never had.
Right.
And so to me, that means a lot. Being there for my kids and my family means more to me than a job or anything else.
I have being this is my second marriage, and this goes back to what I think would be from my first experience, my first marriage, what have you, in terms of getting one's priorities straight, what have you. I think it's very important. I know it's very important that boundaries are established. And when I say that, I mean when you're married, the fact of the matter is the number one person in my life besides my Lord and Savior, not beside, but my Lord and Savior number one, next is my wife. And I can remember getting married and making it very clear, because I was divorced and separated from my first wife, and making it very clear to my children, nothing comes before my wife. If you want me to show up to your events, graduations, and all that, my wife's name has to be on the invitation. And I made that perfectly clear. And to this day, my kids understand that, but more importantly, my wife knew that. She's never felt like she had to compete. But if you know my wife, she wouldn't feel that way anyway. But I thought it was imperative that she knew that she comes first.
Well, it was respect from you, respect that you wanted your kids and your wife to have respect for one another. So you wanted them to have a good relationship.
Yeah, but they also have to have that good relationship when they know the boundaries.
The boundaries.
And I think that's important. I think a lot of times in most relationships, or maybe even second marriages, one has to feel like we are it and everybody else are the spectators looking in. This is our life, so to speak. And so once that's established, and everybody, believe it or not, falls in line accordingly, and they know their place, so to speak.
Because you build a boundary around you and your wife, and everybody else falls on the out. You establish that, and everybody else falls on the outside of that.
They know that.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
When you speak of boundaries, if you don't set those boundaries with your children would try to play one parent
they do
to
that.
the other. And my wife and I'm gonna tell you, when our kids tried that at some point in time, we're always on the same team. Yeah. And if we disagree,
you don't disagree.
We go talk about it among ourselves, and then exactly. But our kids know. Don't try to do something behind daddy's back. Don't try to do anything behind mama's back, because they're going to talk about it anyway.
Oh, no question.
Well, let me ask you just a question here, from a different perspective. How do you deal with, I guess, like child rearing? If you disagree with your wife, or if I see this a lot in my profession, where one parent disciplines and does things one way, and another parent does it a different way. And it causes a lot of issues sometimes. And I don't know. I guess it's just a question I'm kind of putting out there, because I just want to know if you
want to
are a strict disciplinarian and another parent has a very Dr. Spock liberal point of view about how to rear kids.
I get it. Yeah, I'll take it. I mean, now keep in mind, when my kids were growing up, when I was divorced and separated, my ex-wife would call me because I was a disciplinarian. Now, having said that, and you can discipline with love, and that's important, because kids first and foremost have to know that they're loved. Now, if it's a disagreement about what it is, I always fall back on discernment and everything else, especially when it came to the boys. I'm trying to raise men. So, and sometimes that contradicts with mommy, who is nurturing. But it's important that you bring those differences out, and and this is key. You have no problem explaining that to the wife, because some men, I don't have to explain it, because I said what goes. I want my wife to understand why I do what I do. And so at the same time, so when it comes to the differences of disciplining children, and there's a disagreement, let me tell you how I see that from the male perspective, why it's important that I feel like it's done this way, as opposed to you handing him this, or giving him something that he doesn't really have to work for, or your nurture. Don't get me wrong, you need that, but that can also be overkill, and you weaken him.
Well, can I say this? I'm one of those parents that believe in spare the rod, you spare the child. Yeah. And I'm telling you, there are levels of discipline when it comes to whatever crime you committed. Sometimes we may take a phone. Sometimes we may take a phone and a PlayStation. But sometimes you need your butt whooped.
Yeah, and all this timeout stuff. There's too much timeout.
There's no go put your nose in the corner. But anyway, one thing
we're definitely going to have a topic on that also.
But let me say this, though. One thing that is important, before I discipline my children, I spoke with them before they were disciplined. Mm-hmm. If I didn't do it on the front end, I did go back on the back end, and we sat down and talked about why I disciplined them. Because you don't want to just discipline a child and they don't really quite understand why. Mm-hmm. You got to have dialogue either before or after, and I think that's just as important as the discipline itself.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I just want to ask you all a question about your marriages too. How about that?
Oh, kids are a
That
big
is-
part of marriage.
That's
Yeah,
right.
they
Kids
are.
a big part of marriage.
They are. How do you? One question I have for you all: how do you feel about sleeping in separate rooms with your wife?
It depends on the reason as to why you sleep in separate rooms. What do you mean? Are
Right.
they,
I mean,
are they mad with
if
each
your
other?
wife or if you just want to sleep in another room, you just want to you just want to sleep in a room. You don't have to be mad at each other. You just want to sleep in a separate room. This is
Well,
a question.
I'll take
ahead.
it quick because I don't have a wife, so I can, I guess, chime in real fast. But when I was married, I saw it as a level of, I guess, if you're sleeping in separate rooms, people think, okay, it's something wrong if you're sleeping in separate rooms.
Right.
That's what people normally will think. It's something's wrong if you're not sleeping in the same room. And just that traditional view of, okay, this is the married couple's house. This is what they do. You got to be in the same room. But sometimes by need of necessity, one person might be sick and you do that, or one person might be a little bit more, I guess, introverted and just need that little personal space.
Right.
Sometimes.
And you okay? Would you be okay with that?
Well, it would depend on circumstance and the situation, but I'm not saying it's a marker.
Right.
Like I think a lot of people think that if they're in separate rooms, sleeping at night, it's definitely something wrong. I don't necessarily think that.
Exactly.
I don't necessarily think that. I think, I know several of my friends, they say they sleep in separate rooms and they have successful marriages.
Right.
That's not a big deal. So that's just my perspective. Now, moving on.
Dennis.
Well, you know what? That won't work in my house.
Okay.
Now, because I like to be up under my wife and I like for her to be up under me.
Okay.
We have a queen size bed and didn't get a king size just because it was too much space in between us. So I tried to get her to invest in a king, and we both agreed that, hey, no, that's not how we're going to do this. So we again, goes back to physical touch.
Right.
I want you touching me when I go to sleep.
Right.
Yeah.
That's nice, Dennis. That's nice.
I would agree. And I made the mistake of getting a king size bed.
And it puts a lot of distance between you, right?
It does. And I like being up under my wife and touching her and everything else. But to get back to your point to Terrence, and there are times when, as we get older, we develop certain elements. Some people snore, et cetera, and depending on their job situation, they got to
Right.
get up early and all that kind of stuff. And there are days when I fall asleep in the other room just looking at TV. That not necessarily mean I don't want to be up under my wife.
Right.
But if I'm not ready to go to bed, and I fly international, so a lot of times my body clock is all screwed up anyway. But having said that, I like being up under my wife and her up under me. And I like being touched at night and rolling over and she's there.
Exactly.
Okay, I have one last questions for you guys.
Oh, man,
This
just
is
getting
too short.
started.
Yeah,
It's
we
too
just
short.
getting started.
Look, we need this without a moderator.
But let's talk about this section.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this section. Okay, you know what? Actually, I have a couple of questions for you. I'm thinking. How do you like your wife? Some men, as far as dressing. I actually had a young lady that actually called and asked me to ask this question. Is why I'm
Okay.
asking it.
Okay.
How do you like your wife to dress? Like,
Me personally, I want my wife to dress like a lady.
what's a lady? What does that
A
mean
lady
exactly?
is a woman that's not trying to get attention with her clothes.
Okay.
A woman's mind would be more attractive to me than what she has on, trying to show off, what she has. I never was don't get me wrong. Looks, it does attract men.
Yeah.
That's
Let me
the
not
first
get it
thing.
wrong.
That's how
But-
we got. Yeah.
My wife and my daughter, when you go out of the house, I expect you to dress like a lady, if that makes sense.
No,
And not
no,
like
that
and
makes
not
sense.
like a
Say it, man.
not like a
Woman
like
of
a
the
floozy
street, yeah.
or somebody in the street.
What's
Yeah.
dressing like a floozy? What's dressing like a lady? Like what
Flesh
type-
show.
If you got to show all flesh cleavage,
Okay.
Cleavage
and all
hanging out.
that, it's just not
Yeah.
to me. Now listen, again, it goes back to where I am in my life. Now that is not attractive to me.
Okay. What do you think, Terrence?
Oh, well, I think about what I look for in a future mate. I've been married, being single now, and what I look for in a future mate. And you know, it's a lot like what you were saying, Dennis. You don't want a woman to overly, I guess, want to try to accentuate, expose themselves just to attract. And you can see that anywhere. You can go out many places and see that anywhere. But you really, you know, possibly second time around, you know, you want to look at more what's in a lady's mind, and you know, and what, you know, how they carry themselves, whether they're healthy. I mean, there's nothing wrong with having a little bit of vivaciousness about what you're wearing and stuff like that. I mean, men like that. I like that. I mean, I have to be honest with you. Yeah, I'm gonna be attracted to a woman that's dressed nice and that you know, looks appealing. That's one of the first things.
A little bit of cleavage.
A little bit of cleavage is fine, you know,
Okay.
you know, stuff like
Classic
that.
and elegant.
Classic.
Yeah.
That's the word.
Classic and elegant at the same time.
The,
And it
the,
can
the
be
key
very.
is the key is you want to be able to take them to your mom's house.
There you
If mom doesn't like it, then it's gonna be a problem.
Okay. What would you what?
Hold on. You know what? Before you ask that question,
Okay.
how old was the young lady that asked you to ask that question?
How old was she? 40ish.
Interesting.
Okay.
She should know better.
Yeah.
She just wanted. She was just a question. What do you mean she should know better?
But she should know. She's been living
know by
on.
now.
She's been living long enough to know.
She just wanted to know how the men felt. The question was for the men,
Okay.
not how she felt. She wanted to know how the men felt.
Did she tell you what she thought the answer should be?
No.
She
just
didn't share that with you?
She just wanted. It was just a
Okay.
question.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
What do you think the motivation behind the question is? I guess that's what we're
Yeah.
asking.
The motivation is women talk about that. How
Okay.
how men like their women to dress. Because actually, a lot of men, and I say some men that are married, they go outside of their home and they look at other women with the way the other women dress. So they wonder, you know,
Is
do
that
you
something-
like the other women because of the way they dress, but yet you want your woman to look a certain way in the house?
Well-
Your wife to look a certain way in the house? You like one woman on the outside showing more cleavage, having more tighter clothes, but then you want your wife at home looking like
Oh, dumpy, whatever.
But you know what? I
Like-
guess
like-
You know,
Yeah.
the women that, in most cases, women who dress that way are looking for attention. They're looking for attention. So they get it.
a woman.
She's getting exactly what she wants.
Exactly.
The look.
and that's it.
And that's it.
Nothing in the mind like you
A,
said.
Well,
a woman is. She should dress according to what she's fishing for. Does that make sense?
Makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
What is she fishing for? If she want a man, she gonna go out. She gonna walk out classy. If she looking for somebody to
looking
pay
for
her
a-
bills, she gonna put on something else. Is she looking for a man or she looking for a boy? There's a
Just
difference.
depends on the woman, what they looking for. You just said it. It depends on what they looking for. Whether they looking for a boy, they looking for a man. They could be looking for a man that's
They
fishing.
can be looking for a sugar daddy. You
They
know.
could be looking for a sugar
Well,
daddy.
that's how she should dress.
Whatever bait
Whatever
you put
she's
on the
bait-
hook,
that's what you're gonna catch.
That's what you're gonna
Exactly.
get.
But you want your wife at home looking.
No, I didn't say.
A certain
No,
way.
We
you
talk.
said
You
that.
talk about the woman and what she thought.
No, she said.
Exactly.
You said that. Janet getting a little offensive over here.
No,
But you
I'm
wanna
not
do a-
getting offensive, y'all. We talking.
Defensive.
We keeping
Don't
it
ask
real.
if you don't want to know.
No, we want to know.
I think most men, and I'm kind of dissecting the question a little bit. I think
Yeah.
most men, in terms of what their wife or mate is wearing, some things are reserved for the bedroom, and most men who have a certain way in which they perceive what their wife is wearing, some things are reserved in a whole different area. But I don't think most men want to. If we're going to the mall, going to church, you want your wife to be classy. You want her to
Exactly.
have a certain look. And that thing that you're talking about, maybe when women are saying stuff like, well, what's going to keep his interest, you can do that somewhere else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know.
And nowadays, and people crazy. I mean, shucks, you dress like that, then that brings problems and attention. And then out of respect and the way I feel like if I'm being disrespected because somebody's doing that, but you,
Yeah.
know, you bring that attention on. Come on, we don't need those kind of problems.
Okay. What would you change if you had to do it all over again? What would you change? Would you change anything?
Oh yeah. I mean, without a doubt. I mean, having a marriage that didn't work. I mean, I don't think anybody goes into a marriage thinking. You go into the marriage thinking it's gonna last forever. when it doesn't work, then you look back, and in hindsight, as I look back now, I think about some things that I could have changed. And, I guess, more important is opening up the communication and just doing some things. First and foremost, I look back at it now and say, there was no core to my marriage. When I say that is, there was no spiritual guide. We didn't have that spiritual guide that could have possibly brought us back. We started out in love. We really loved each other, and I still feel like even in the end, my wife, my ex-wife, I still felt like she loved me.
Right.
But we just didn't have that
spiritual
guide
guidance.
to bring us back together, and we would kind of, your question was what, how was I lost? I think she was lost in certain ways too.
Right.
Just no, we don't need any counseling. We don't need to do this. We don't need to do that. It's over. We didn't have that spiritual guide that said, let's come back together and try to make it work. Right. And that didn't exist. So it dissolved, So I would change that. I would put God first.
That's a good answer. As far as my marriage, I think, piggybacking off of Terrence, if I would have taken my relationship with Christ a little bit sooner in my marriage, if I would have taken it more serious, those first couple of years wouldn't have been as rough as they were. Other than that, I wouldn't change a thing.
That sounds great.
I ditto everything they've said, except for the fact that I would work more on me. Growth, not just spiritual, but in all areas of my life, and that's what I would do. I would just work more on me and make it and have a game plan for working on me, in which I do now. If I had done it differently, I mean, that's the kind of things I do now. Work more on me than anything.
Okay, I'm going to ask you all this question also, because Dr. Aldridge, you're divorced, and this is your second marriage, so you've been divorced. And from what I heard, I'm not going to really say you, Jeffrey, but because you were so young when you got married the first time, you were 23 years old. You said when you got married.
24, yeah.
But, and what I'm hearing actually from everybody, and really too, including myself, when you are married or even before you get married, you have to have a spiritual bond somehow. And you actually have to work on yourself first before you can have that connection with that person that you're going to marry. Because if you don't, you're walking into a marriage with problems before it even's developed. You're walking into a marriage with problems because if you don't, because you're going to go into the marriage and you're both going to be having issues because you're both searching for what you're missing or what you don't understand right. Because, Dennis, when you spoke earlier, you talked about you didn't have that father figure in your home that you needed.
Right.
And you worked in the shop, and there were men in the shop, and you were in church physically, but mentally and emotionally and spiritually, you were not there.
At that time, no.
At that time in your life. And Terrence, you've said the same thing, pretty much. You've said the same thing about your life, even with still today at your age where you are today, there are things, and you're dating right now,
Yes.
right? And you were divorced 10 years ago. This 10 years you've been divorced.
10 years.
So would you say that you've actually gained more? I'm not even talking about just your experience, but when we just talked about the five
love languages.
5 love languages,
I mean,
that was new to you
Yeah,
to
that-
understand that, right?
Well, that's very inspirational. I mean, I've seen like versions of it on the internet, but just didn't really pay attention to it. But sitting here in this forum, and I thank you for that.
Yes.
I think, this session here, been divorced, been married before, and now single, this forum and this podcast has really opened me up to a lot of things. And what I'm saying is to be able to hear from some other fellows who've been down some roads and had some hard times, but made it through it. It gives me inspiration, and for them to share that with me is very important. And I think that's why I think this particular session this is important to me very personally,
Right.
not just to share out, but I'm sitting here gaining a lot of information.
That's awesome.
So that's very important to me. So I just want to thank you guys for being, sharing out and, sharing your experiences and what you see, because you're at a position where I haven't been. We've shared some things in a lot of ways, but I think at the same time, to make it a lasting relationship. I don't want to be single the rest of my life.
Right.
I think, as you think about older age and you think about, okay, yes, you have some professional achievements and you have some things, but in the end, you want to be able to say that you shared it with someone, and you want to be able to, I feel like it's one thing that I fear. I'll just be honest with you. Dying old or being by yourself forever. That's a
fear.
That's a strong fear, to sit there and think, I won't have anybody with me. Who's gonna, who am I gonna take care of? Who's gonna take care of me? What are we gonna share together? A lifetime of achievement, or whatever it is what we call achievement. So
Right. Not only that, but
that's
married
important.
men live longer. You know that, right?
That is correct.
They say that. They said a happy
So,
marriage, people live longer with a happy marriage.
So I can't remember what your initial question
Yeah,
was,
what was
but the 5 love languages, that's I can't say totally new, but I think
It's insight.
I think it being broken down the way in which they talk
Right.
about it and how important it is. As being a single person, that's not something when you're around other single guys, that's not something we really talk about.
Right.
What
What advice would you all give other men out there then? Like, what advice would you give other men that's either in their marriages and having problems or looking to get married, like Terrence? What advice would you give them?
I would say seek God first. Seek your own personal growth. And seek God first. Seek your own personal growth. And then if you're, like you said, if you're married, what have you. It's hard to concentrate on your problems when you're thinking of other people. And I guess by that I mean, what you focus on grows. So if you can focus on the positive growth of your relationship as opposed to whatever it is that's going on with you, I would say definitely seek God first in your own personal growth.
What do you say, Dennis?
Well, if a guy's out there and he's listening to this podcast, I would say you've tried it your way. You've already tried it your way. And if your way is not working, try it another way. Okay, you asked me, how do you try it that way? It's like what Jeffrey said. First, I feel that you must have a spiritual relationship with God. And once you line your will up with His, everything will be granted unto you. And then I would also say, learn of yourself. Learn what your language is. Learn what makes you feel loved. And when you meet that person that you find interesting, learn what makes that person feel loved as well. And you keep pouring whatever it is that make that person feel loved. Keep pouring into their tank. You fill that tank up. It's just like filling up a car with a tank of gas. You can go a long way on it.
No question.
And that will take you a long way.
That's true. This has been awesome, guys. This has been truly awesome, guys.
I really enjoyed it.
I did too.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to say we will have a listening party coming in January. We will be announcing the date on Instagram. The listening party is going to be, we're going to bring the men and the women back together, and we're going to talk about losing yourself in your marriage openly and hearing both sides together. This is Raw and Uncut, the real deal. We're going to give it to you raw every time. But I do have something that I want to give you the raw takeaway for today. There are so many people that complain about how they are not happy with their life. But until you are sick and tired of being sick and tired, your life circumstances will never change. You will continue to be unhappy. Only you can change your circumstances, change your thinking, change your bad decisions, change your spirit. Once you commit to change, your life will change with peace, joy, love, and even your finances will change for the better. It is up to you, not someone else, to make you happy. Thank you, guys.
Thank
I
you
want to
for having
thank
me.
you
Thank you for
all
having
for
us.
being
Thank
here.
you, Janet.
Really
Thank
enjoyed
you.
it.
I enjoyed it immensely.
Woo.
You be the change.
Perfect.
All right.